3 minutes ago, ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory made direct contact with the most consequential military address in the Middle East. The target was not a radar installation on the outskirts of a city. It was not a logistics depot or a fuel storage facility somewhere in the desert. The target was the beating heart of the entire Israeli military command structure. The sprawling, heavily fortified compound in the center of Tel Aviv that houses the IDF General Staff, the Air Force Command, the Military Intelligence Directorate, and the Underground Operations Center from which every strike, every intercept, every battlefield decision in this war has been planned and executed in real time. That compound was just hit. And in the minutes that have passed since the missiles landed, something has happened that is more telling than any official statement could ever be. The Israeli military has gone completely silent. This is not a communication delay. This is not a press office managing its timing before releasing a carefully worded response. Every channel that has been active throughout this conflict, every official spokesperson feed, every military social media platform, every communications line that has produced statements, updates, and operational briefings through every previous Iranian strike has produced nothing, not a single word, not a single post. The silence that has descended since those missiles hit is the silence of a command structure that has been hit at its foundation, not at its edges. When a military's central nervous system takes a direct strike, the silence that follows is not a choice. It is a symptom. To understand the full weight of what just happened, you need to understand precisely what this compound is and what it contains. This is a 30-acre military complex that has sat at the center of Israeli defense architecture since the founding of the state. Beneath its surface lies one of the most heavily reinforced command bunkers in the region, an underground facility engineered to allow military command to continue functioning even under sustained and severe missile attack. Above ground, the compound houses the command structures for the Air Force operations that have been conducting daily strikes deep into Iranian territory since this conflict escalated in late February. It houses the Intelligence Directorate's processing infrastructure, the systems that generate real-time targeting data, that integrate signals from every sensor and source available to Israeli military intelligence, and that feed that data into active strike packages while they are still airborne. It houses the Joint Operations Center where ground, air, and naval components are coordinated simultaneously, where deconfliction happens in real time, and where the chain of command connecting the Prime Minister's security cabinet to every soldier and pilot in the field runs through without interruption. This compound is not a symbol. It is not a landmark that carries historical significance without operational function. Every military capability Israel possesses, every aircraft, every missile battery, every intelligence network, every field unit depends on this compound being operational to function as a unified, coordinated force rather than as a collection of disconnected assets operating without central direction. Iran just struck it with a weapons combination that was not designed to send a message. It was designed to destroy it. The missiles used in this strike were not a standard ballistic salvo fired in the hope that volume would overcome Israeli air defenses. Early assessment reporting from defense correspondents with sourcing inside the regional security establishment indicates that Iran deployed a two-layer strike architecture specifically engineered to defeat exactly the kind of hardened infrastructure this compound was built to survive. The first layer consisted of hypersonic maneuvering warheads targeted at the above-ground facility structures, the power systems, the communications arrays, the ventilation infrastructure, and the access points that the underground command bunker depends on to remain functional even when the surface above it is under attack. The second layer consisted of deep-penetrating warheads targeted at the underground bunker itself, warheads that were specifically engineered to defeat reinforced underground construction of precisely the type that bunker represents. This distinction matters enormously. A hardened underground command facility is designed with a core assumption built into every element of its construction, that it will survive near misses, that it will continue functioning after significant surface damage, and that its reinforced depth will protect the command infrastructure inside it from anything short of a direct hit with a weapon specifically designed to reach it. The bunker beneath this compound was built to survive scenarios that military planners considered extreme. Iran fired weapons at it that were designed for exactly those extreme scenarios. The surface strike was not the main event. It was the preparation for the main event. Destroying the above-ground infrastructure that the bunker depends on for power, communications, and access was the first step. Sending penetrating warheads through the reinforced construction of the bunker itself was the second. The combination of those two steps, executed simultaneously against the same target, is not a strike designed to damage this compound. It is a strike designed to functionally eliminate it as an operational command center. And the communications blackout that has persisted since those missiles landed is the clearest available evidence that the design worked. A military whose command infrastructure has taken serious but survivable damage does not go dark. It slows down. It manages its messaging more carefully. It takes longer to respond. A military whose central command facility has been functionally disrupted at the source goes dark in exactly the way the Israeli military has gone dark since this strike. The silence is not caution. The silence is consequence. What losing this compound means operationally extends far beyond the physical destruction of buildings and infrastructure in a specific location in central Tel Aviv. Every military operation Israel is currently conducting runs through the command and control architecture that was housed in that compound. The daily air campaign against Iranian targets, the strike packages that have been launching continuously since late February, requires simultaneous real-time coordination between Air Force Command, the Intelligence Directorate feeding live targeting data, the Operations Center processing battle damage assessment, and the communications infrastructure binding all of those elements together into a functioning system. That coordination does not happen automatically when the primary infrastructure supporting it is struck. It transfers to backup systems, and backup systems are not equivalent to what they replace. Israel maintains contingency command infrastructure at hardened sites outside Tel Aviv. The existence of those sites is not a secret, and their purpose is precisely this: to provide continuity of command in a scenario where the primary command facility is disabled. But contingency infrastructure was designed for emergency continuity, not for sustained high-intensity combat operations of the scale and complexity Israel is currently conducting. The difference between operating from primary command infrastructure and operating from contingency systems is not the difference between a fast computer and a slower one-running identical software. It is the difference between a fully integrated, purpose-built command architecture with complete connectivity to every intelligence source, every operational system, and every communications channel the military depends on, and a significantly degraded backup system that was built to keep the lights on, not to fight a war at full capacity from. Israel is now attempting to transition to that degraded system in the middle of an active high-intensity conflict against an adversary that just demonstrated it can hit the facility that transition was supposed to protect against losing. The operational consequences of that transition are unfolding across every dimension of Israel's current military posture simultaneously. Strike packages against Iranian targets that were being coordinated through fully integrated primary command infrastructure are now being managed through contingency systems with reduced capacity and reduced connectivity to the intelligence architecture that generates the targeting data those packages depend on. Air defense coordination for the entire country, which was being centrally managed through the compound's command systems, is now operating in a degraded mode where the integration between interceptor batteries, radar networks, and command authority is less seamless and less responsive than it was before those missiles landed. Intelligence processing that was providing real-time battlefield awareness to Israeli commanders is now running through systems with less capacity and less connectivity to the full range of sources that the primary infrastructure integrated. Every spoke connected to the center of this wheel is now operating with less support from that center than it was operating with yesterday. The American dimension of this strike carries consequences that extend beyond Israeli military capacity alone. The communications architecture that enabled real-time coordination between Israeli military command and United States Central Command ran through this compound on the Israeli side. That architecture is now disrupted. Whatever contingency communications exist between Israeli command and American forces in this theater are less capable, less integrated, and less suited to the volume and complexity of coordination that active shared military operations require than what was functioning through this compound before this morning. The United States is now operating in a shared military theater alongside an Israeli partner whose primary command infrastructure has been struck, whose real-time coordination capacity has been materially degraded, and whose ability to deconflict operations, share intelligence, and coordinate strike packages in shared airspace has been measurably diminished. That degradation is not only Israel's operational problem, it is a problem for every military activity the United States is conducting in this theater that depends on a functional and coordinated Israeli command structure on the other end of the line. The political dimension of this strike is operating at a pressure level that makes every previous political crisis this conflict has produced look contained by comparison. The communications infrastructure through which Israel's political leadership exercises authority over its military ran through this compound. A prime minister whose primary military command facility has been struck, whose communications with senior commanders are now running through contingency channels that are less secure and less capable than what existed yesterday, is governing a war from a fundamentally different position than the one he occupied when this day began. The questions that will follow inside the political establishment are going to be the sharpest and most uncomfortable any Israeli government has faced since this conflict was launched. How was the most important military compound in the country not evacuated, dispersed, or sufficiently protected before Iran was able to execute a strike of this precision and this scale against it? What intelligence existed regarding Iranian targeting of this compound, and what decisions were made about that intelligence before those missiles were fired? Why was the entire command infrastructure of the Israeli military concentrated in a single location in the middle of a major civilian city during a conflict in which Iran had already demonstrated a consistent and improving ability to strike high-value targets with increasing precision? These questions do not have answers that will satisfy a public that has been watching the government's assurances about the conduct and trajectory of this war erode strike by strike since the first uncontested missile landed over Tel Aviv. Military command requires centralization to function. Dispersing command infrastructure across multiple locations reduces its effectiveness and introduces coordination failures that degrade operational performance. The tension between concentrating command for effectiveness and dispersing it for survivability is one of the oldest and most unresolved problems in military planning. Israel chose concentration. Iran studied that concentration, engineered a weapons combination specifically designed to defeat the hardening that concentration relied on for its survivability, and executed a strike against it that the communications blackout now unfolding suggests achieved exactly what it was designed to achieve. The global response arriving in the hours following this strike carries an urgency and a gravity that reflects how categorically different this target is from everything Iran has struck before it. Previous Iranian strikes in this conflict hit military infrastructure at the operational level. Radar installations, air bases, logistics nodes, weapons storage facilities, civilian population centers, and nuclear infrastructure. Each of those categories of target is significant. Each one represented an escalation at the time it occurred, but none of them was the institution that commands and coordinates the totality of Israeli military power simultaneously. Striking this compound is not striking a component of Israeli military capability. It is striking the institution through which all of those components are directed, coordinated, and controlled as a unified force. The message embedded in this strike is the most unambiguous Iran has delivered at any point in this conflict. The underground bunker that was engineered to be survivable has been struck. The nuclear facilities protected by the most layered air defense architecture in the region have been struck repeatedly. And now the military headquarters from which the entire Israeli war effort has been commanded and directed has been struck and silenced. The capability demonstration Iran has delivered through the cumulative targeting choices of this conflict is no longer ambiguous. It has been made explicit. What remains is not a military question, The military consequences of this strike are already unfolding in the degraded command architecture, the disrupted communications, the contingency systems now carrying loads they were not built to sustain, and the operational capacity that has been measurably reduced across every dimension of Israel's current military posture. What remains is a political question of a kind this conflict has not yet forced into the open with this degree of directness. A government that launched this conflict with public assurances of a swift and decisive outcome is now conducting that conflict from contingency systems. Behind a communications blackout, after watching its nuclear infrastructure struck, its cities hit without meaningful defensive response, and its primary military headquarters silenced by an adversary that has demonstrated at every stage of this conflict that it understood exactly what it was doing and exactly what it was targeting. The distance between what the public was told this war would look like and what it has become is no longer a gap that messaging can bridge. It is a chasm that the silence still emanating from the struck compound in central Tel Aviv is making it impossible to ignore. At what point does a government conducting a war from systems that were never designed to sustain it acknowledge to its public that the conflict it initiated has moved beyond the boundaries of what it described, what it planned for, and what it is currently equipped to control?